And here we go. Okay. Super excited today, guys. We're talking about using MLS carts. So hopefully you can see my screen. I've got a little PDF put together here that if you'd like, you're welcome to email me, plazatl@kw.com. I'm happy to send it to you. I'll also try to post a link to it as well. So using MLS carts. The carts in MLS are, just to start with, what are carts? So a cart in MLS is a way to group MLS listings of any status under a contact. So you can add or remove listings from that cart. So it's just a way to gather the different listings and different records in MLS. And you can add or remove listings. You can do a number of different things. There's lots of ways that you can use that in your business to create a system or a process and just make yourself more efficient. So let's walk through kind of the basics of a cart first, and then we'll go in and do some of this as well. So let's start by using an example of adding listings to a cart. So again, I have got this handout that you guys will be able to use and reference later for your notes when you go through and do this yourself. You're going to sign into your MLS, and then you're going to want to select, so like for our example here, we're going to select all active listings that are in the zip code 64113, that are a single family home with 3 or more bedrooms, and then 2 or more car garage between 0 and 400,000. So we're going to just go about creating a search just like you would. Now you can go in and find the listings and the records any way you'd like. I'm just using this example as a way that we're going to identify what we're going to put in our cart for our contact. So once those search results come up, you're welcome to go in and on each record, review it, see if it's one that you want to add to the cart for that contact. And if so, you'll select this box up on the top left. You can also select the listings from just on the left here, the checkbox on the left for each listing. And then in the next step here, you're going to want to click on carts at the bottom. And so we'll click on the cart. So this little toolbar across the bottom, there's a number of different things. The last option here is carts. And here you're going to want to say, well, I haven't created one for a cart before, so we're just starting. We're going to click new cart. And once that pops up, you're able to name the cart. So for our example, we're going to call it listing comps. And we're going to pretend as though I am looking for comps to support the listing that I'm going to get ready to go out and take. So if I haven't created a contact for this individual in MLS yet, you can create that here. If you have, we'll just be able to select their name from the drop down. But since I haven't, we're going to click create a new contact. We're going to simply enter the contact's information. So Alex Abel at gmail.com is just our example. Again, example. You're going to click save, and as you can see, that automatically populates Alex's name in this drop-down window for the contact. We can click save, and once we do that, guys, this does go kind of quick. I did take screenshots so you'll be able to reference it, but once we click save, you're going to see a yellow bar here pop up at the top, and in that yellow bar, it's going to say 3 listings added 3 listings to Alex Abel's cart. And you'll also see that that's reflected down here in this little drop-down window showing that Abel, Alex, listing comps, which is the name of the cart, 3. Now, if you'd like, you can go in, and I show this at the end, but like a lot of times whenever I'm comping something, whether it be to look for houses to send to somebody, and we'll talk about that, but I might come in and say, okay, they said they really want 2-car garage, but let's see if there's any more options in this price range for this person if I go down to just 1 car. So you can go in and revise your search, and that's one of the great things about using carts, is you can go find your different listings and include them in that cart. So one example too would be where now maybe I'd say, okay, I'm going to go ahead and include these. One example where I used this a lot when I was selling is when a buyer would send me, hey, can we go look at these 5 properties. And they'd send me an address that they found on Zillow. They'd send me an MLS number that they found somewhere else. And then they would send me, you know, have checked a few that they had in their favorite searches on the consumer app or something. And so I'd have to go gather them from all different places to try to schedule showings. Well, this was a great way that I could go look that one up by the address, and I could go look the other one up by the MLS number, and then just continue to pile it into that contacts cart. So for example, now I can go and select carts again. And Alex Abel was already in here, but had he not been, we would be able to just go in and find their name. And then you can click this add to button, and it's going to add these 2 listings to the cart. Now, if I would have already been going, and a lot of times when I was looking at, like, especially when I was comping for a new listing, so when I was looking for comparable properties, I would look at it 6 different ways and say, well, maybe now I'm going to look at it from the school district level, or maybe now I am going to include 1.5 baths, and look at it multiple different ways. Sometimes I would end up selecting the same comp and trying to add that same comparable property to a cart, and with, you know, with others. And in those times, it wouldn't actually add that comp, that comparable property to the cart if it already was in there. So that yellow bar might pop up and say 0 listings added to the cart. And that's because it already added it to it. So again, all of these directions for creating the cart and creating a contact are here in the handout. And again, we're talking about the yellow bar, and that once something's already in the cart, you can't add it again. Now, if you'd like to go, we'll talk about how you go in and view the cart. So let's say we've gathered our comps from many different places and been adding it to the cart, and now we want to go in and view what is in the cart. You're going to want to make sure that your contact's name and the name of the cart is in the drop-down window, and then you can just click this view button. And then it's going to bring up all of the properties that you've collected and added to that cart. And at this point, you can come in and review those. And if you are saying, well, gosh, we really only have time to view 4 properties, or I really only want to use 4 of these properties, or this one's not such a great fit now that I have all these others in here, you're able to remove listings from the cart by just selecting it again here with the checkbox on the far left. Or if you're looking at them as you're scrolling through and you're saying, okay, as I scroll through, I no longer think that this 26 West 69th Terrace is a good fit, you can use that little checkbox just in the upper left. And then you'll come down to this cart piece again across the bottom. And here you're going to say remove checked. And that will remove that listing. And again, your yellow bar will confirm, remove that listing from the cart, and it'll narrow it down just to the remaining ones that you have remaining. Okay, so when you want to go back and you say, okay, this is great. One of the wonderful things about using a cart is that there's times where maybe you only have a few minutes to put towards a task. So let's say you've got 10 minutes to prepare before you need to head out for an appointment, but you're like, I'd really like to use that time to see if there's any houses I should be sending to the Smiths. Well, you could sit down and work on putting some properties in a cart for the Smith family. And then if you had to leave and you weren't quite done, you could come back to it later and continue to look at the properties in that cart. So it's just nice that it's a gathering place. So if you do need to come back to a cart later that you've created for whatever reason, let me show you kind of the path to get to that. So once you sign in to the MLS, you'll want to go to My Matrix, and then they've got this cute little shopping cart that you can go to in the list, and you'll click on carts. Within carts, you can use these column header names to sort by. And if you'd like, you can sort by the cart name or the contact name, and that's going to group all of the different contacts together, or last use. So if you know, gosh, what did I name that cart? Did I end up putting it with a contact? You could just use the last use. So that too kind of goes through that lookup process and how you can filter or sort those columns to find your cart. Okay, we already talked about deleting listings from carts and how you can remove those. And then I wanted to share too. So let's go into our contacts cart. So this number, when you look at the carts in this view, the number here shows you exactly how many listings records are in that cart. So for Alex Abel, it's shown that we have 4 listings in his cart. I can click on that 4 and it'll open up the cart for us. And once I'm in here, it's super easy to select, and then you could email those to Alex. You could print them like you normally do directions if you're getting ready to set up showings, etc. You've got the full functionality of this toolbar that you normally have when you're just creating a search in MLS. Okay. So other tips, if you do get to where you're looking for your contact, scrolling all the way to the bottom, you'll see there's a more button, and that's where if you've got a lot of contacts, they just don't list all of them. Just click more and then it'll show you every single contact to select to create a cart for. Also, note that carts are limited to 200 listings per cart. So if there's ever a time that you're trying to add a bunch of records to a cart and it's grayed out, it's because you've got more than 200 records either that you're trying to add, or the number that you're trying to add in combination with what's already in the cart exceeds 200. So just either reduce the number that you're doing, create multiple carts, or that would be why that functionality isn't showing up. And again, this is just showing you that you can, that you have that full use of that toolbar at the bottom when you're in the carts. Okay, let's chat a little bit more about carts and how it is we use them. So in business, the processes and such that I was talking about in using carts, you can use carts to prospect. So if you're looking at an area to farm, you could go in and create your search and say, hey, for this certain part of Overland Park, I am going to farm this area, and you could create a cart for recently listed or expireds or for sale by owners in that area that you're trying to farm, and monitor kind of those listings and what happens to them in that cart. You could also, again, use it for expireds or canceled listings, create carts to keep an eye on those. Previous clients that you want to target. So you could have where you put all your previous clients in a cart and then monitor to where then you would want to be able to check in and speak up, speak to them as you called and said, hey, let's, chat about, if you guys considered selling, you'd have their listing at your fingertips. Also, you could put in there friends listings when they bought that you're trying to work with. So this may not be a previous client. If you're new in the business, or if you've been in the business for 6 years and you meet someone and you say, oh, wow, like their family is growing. Maybe they will want to sell their home and buy a new home soon. You could create a cart of prospects and add their home to it. That way, when you're calling through and you're making calls or thinking of who you could make calls to, you could have their information at your fingertips to know that they live in a 3-bedroom, 2.5 bath with a 2-car garage. And with their growing family, maybe they really need a 4-bedroom, but you kind of would have a good idea of what they paid for it. And then now having the functionality to be able to see RPR reports and such, it might be helpful. Another way was, like we talked a little bit, buyers. So when you're working with buyers, it's a great way to go through, if they've got multiple searches that you've got them set up on the MLS, but to go through and gather which ones you want to point out to them. So if you've got someone that's on a number of searches and they're getting a lot of listings each day, this might be a great way for you to comb through those listings and maybe pick out your top 3 or pick out ones you think are really great and send and say, hey, these ones really stood out to me. But it would be a way for you to gather those so you could send them all in one email. Also, it would be, like as we spoke, gathering the ones they send to you that they want to go look at. Sometimes those come from multiple different sources. And so it's a great way to put them all together and then use that cart for scheduling your showings. So again, one example there might very well be, if these are the 4 houses that Alex wants to look at when we go look at houses tomorrow, I can come in here and use it to create directions and then print that map and write my listing times on it. I can also come in here and use it to go to showing times to create showings for the 4 properties. And then they're all 4 right there, ready to be scheduled. I can also use it to print out handouts to give to them. Another way is to have them in, so if we have all of these in that cart, those 4 listings, and I'm out showing Alex those 4 houses, if I've got them in a cart, it's easy for me to pull those up on my iPad or on my iPhone or something of the sort, to where if I wanted to, they said, how old's the roof on this one? Or what was the square footage again on this one? If I didn't have the printouts, or if there was something that I couldn't reference on the printouts that I had with me, it was always really nice and easy for me to pull it up in that cart for those 4 properties and to say, oh yes, this is the one that had, you know, this note about how they were willing to give us a carpet allowance, kind of a thing. Or, hey, let me pull up the seller's disclosure on this one. It takes 2 seconds if it's in a cart, easy for you to access. Also, I would sometimes use a cart to where if we were going out to look at property and maybe it was in an area that I wasn't super familiar with or comfortable with, I sometimes, so that I was prepared, especially if the client seemed like they were ready to make it happen and write an offer, I would often create a cart of comps, like not all the perfect comps, but like a general idea of what the comps are for that neighborhood. So that while I was out showing, if they ended up liking the homes that were in Verona Gardens, I could quickly, and they said, well, what do you think on the price on this one? I could quickly pull up the cart that I had created for Verona Gardens and look through those comps really, really fast and get an idea of like, well, this neighborhood really usually maxed out at this price, or a 3-bedroom in this area kind of is in this range. Let me do a little more digging and give you a better opinion. But they were right at my fingertips. Instead of me trying to fumble to create a search on hand, like right there, it gave me a good feel to have those, you know, a little confidence to have those comps on me. Also, I would often use it to gather comps to send to a buyer when they were ready to make an offer. So a lot of times when a buyer is like, well, what do you think of the value? Some of them take your word for it and trust you as their trusted advisor, as they should, and others like to see it. And so it would be really easy for me to put together the comps, put it in a cart, and then send it over to my client and say, Verona Gardens comps for, you know, street, you know, 1119, you know, whatever street, and be able to share with them the comps for that specific listing that we're getting ready to write an offer on. There's also, when you're working with out-of-town buyers, I often would use the carts to gather the different houses. If any of you have ever worked with an out-of-town buyer, or when the time comes, it is a ton of work. And often you're trying to show them every property on the market in a short amount of time. So I would create different carts for the different days. And sometimes I'd even break it up into multiple carts for a day. So for example, if the couple flew in on Friday, I would have a Friday afternoon cart. I would then have a Saturday morning cart and a Saturday afternoon cart, and then maybe even a Sunday morning cart. It allowed me to then bundle them together and reduce the number that I was looking at in the carts as we were out and I was trying to get them data on each. But it also helped tremendously with scheduling, to where then I could use just the ones on Friday night afternoon and schedule and map those out. And the same with Saturday morning, Saturday afternoon, and Sunday morning. So that was one way with out-of-town buyers. I helped organize myself and make it easier to schedule those things. Next, I would often use tours, potential, and to create tours and potential open houses. So I would keep an open house potential cart. And as I was farming an area or looking at an area, when it would come on the market and get that out of email, I'd go pop it in the like desirable open houses, and I would reach out to the agent, and then I could leave a note for myself to say, hey, Bill's gonna check with his client and get back to me. But that kind of was where I could gather where I wanted, what houses I wanted to try to shoot for, or asking to hold open. I also would put together like potential, when I was trying to get to know an area better, or like I said before, farm an area or work an area, I would create my own tours for myself. And so I would use carts to kind of gather homes in that area to say, okay, when I have time on Thursday afternoon, I'm going to go preview these 6 properties in this area. I also would keep it a cart of houses I wanted to watch. So while I was out previewing, I saw out of those 6 houses, 2 of them were just like absolutely amazing, because either A, they were turnkey and up to date and like any buyer is going to go gaga over them, or B, man, there's a couple little tweaks you could make to this house that involved paint and just a few little minor changes. And I thought it was overpriced, but gosh, it was a real solid, good house. I would often keep those in a cart to keep an eye on. And those were the things I was talking about at my open houses when buyers came through. Like, hey, did you see that yellow one over on 61st Street? It's a great house. Here, let me pull up and show it. I can email it to you. Let me pull up and show you what I'm talking about, and I'd be happy to show it to you. But then I could keep an eye on that yellow house on 61st Street and either see if they do a price reduction that I could then blast out to people to say, hey, guys, let me tell you, this is a great house. Or I know that, oh gosh, darn it, it went under contract. But I could kind of keep an eye on, those were my talking points at an open house or in an area that, you know, maybe a lot of my sphere of influence happened to be a lot of the time. And again, this wasn't something I did when I was new. This is something I did too, as I was trying to establish myself as a really strong agent in an area. I was watching that area and staying on top of it, and the carts really helped me keep in touch with, hey, that yellow house on 61st Street, or maybe the really fabulous turnkey one, it went under contract in 2 days, and then I could sign back into that cart later and see that it went, you know, the selling price ended up being $22,000 over asking. Well, that's a property that I watched and I was aware of, and it was a great talking point that I could share with other agents or with people that I would run into at the grocery store, and they'd say, oh man, how's the market? That was a house that I could say, hey, this house that's on 58th Street sold for $22,000 over asking in 2 days. It was beautiful. The kitchen was amazing. It actually looks a lot like your kitchen. Have you guys thought about maybe listing your property? Kind of a thing. So it sounds silly, but those carts were kind of nice little parts of my business that I kind of built little systems and habits around. Also, I would say lifesaver. Like, I am so grateful that many, many years ago, I stumbled upon carts for when I'm comping a property. So I know I shared about this a little bit earlier, but when I was going to comp a property, it was a lot of times, like, there's some neighborhoods that you can go in and say, I've got a side-to-side split. It's 3 bedrooms, 2.5 bath, 2-car garage. What's sold in the last 90 days that I can use as a comp? And there's days you get lucky, and there's some that are like, looks just like it, easy peasy. We've got plenty of comps for our presentation. And then there's times where you get properties where you're like, man, there's not a whole lot to go off of. Or this one's really unique because it's totally updated, but the square footage is less than everything else in the area. Or it's got an extra full bath, or, you know, something of that sort. Depending on what part of town you're working in, sometimes you've got to get creative in your comps. And so using the cards was really helpful, because I would start in by going in and putting in 3 bed, 2.5 bath, 2-car garage, side-to-side split. And I'd look at all of those and I would say, okay, like these, and I might add 4, right? And then I'd look at it a little differently, and I might add 3 more. And then I'd look at it a little differently, like I said, maybe from the school district point of view, or maybe something that had less bathrooms, but like was more up to date and bigger. And anywho, I would collect them all into the cart. And at the end of all of that, looking at it multiple different ways, there's a lot of times where I would end up with 12 listings in that cart. Well, I'm sure in the heck not taking 12 listings on a listing presentation. So then I would go in and I would reduce that 12, because now that I've got 12 to look at, it was easier for me to say, well, initially I thought I might need to use this one, but this one's not, it's way more dated and not even the same size. And I would be able to remove it. And I would reduce that 12 down to what was more manageable, but like 6 or 5 or 6 really solid, good, comparable properties. But by being able to add them all together and then look at that, like best case fitting ones in one spot, really helped making comps and creating a comparable analysis so much easier. I also was able to, when I was listing that property, by having those all together in a cart, when I had it listed, and agents would call me and say, buyers agents would call me and say, Elizabeth, I don't know what's going on here. Why do you have this? Like, where are you getting the comps for this one? This price seems really, really aggressive. And mind you, like, I know that we're priced right. I've done my homework. I would say, hey, no problem, buyer's agent. Let me just shoot you over an email real quick with the comps that we use for pricing. I could sign into MLS. I could sign into the cart, click those 5 comps and email them over. Quite often, the buyer's agent would go ahead and say, oh, thanks so much. We'll be sending over an offer now. But it made that ability for me to defend my listing price super easy. Also, whenever it came time for the appraisal, I would often meet the appraiser at the property. I know you guys have heard me talk about that before. So sometimes you do have to pull different comps for the appraiser than what you necessarily used. And that's a whole nother day, a whole nother topic. But I would create another cart for the appraiser comps that I gave to the appraiser. And so it was really great for referencing those where whenever an appraisal came back, if it didn't support value, to say, okay, these are the ones I created. Same thing for the comps that you get from the appraiser if you have to ask for a reconsideration. If there's ever a time that a property doesn't appraise, it's so helpful to go in and create a cart of the appraiser's comps and then email those out to the other agent involved or to your client, so they can easily have them all there to reference and look at how their house maybe compares or how the listing kind of compares. In addition to keeping those, and every single time I would create a new cart. So I wouldn't ever like rename a cart, or I wouldn't ever like delete the listing cart and then all of those. Often, I don't know about you, sometimes I'd end up doing new listing comps. And the reason being is I met with a couple in January and they said, Elizabeth, we're ready to list our house. We're ready to go. Here we go. Let's do this. And I would create a listing comps cart for them, and I'd go present it to them. And then life happens. Or they'd say, you know, we've talked about it. We really want to save a little bit more money before we list. And so let's talk again in the fall. Well, often it was super helpful because when I went to go meet with them in October, I could see exactly what comps very quickly and easily that I had shared with them in January, to kind of get a good feel for like how the message has changed, if the market has changed, and kind of what their expectations are. Okay, finally, I would super recommend that you guys keep a cart of your past sales. It's super helpful to go back and reference whether you're creating your transaction tracking, and it's kind of fun as well. So that's another way that you can use carts. So are there any questions? Zach, do you have any questions I can help answer?
No, I'm good. I'm good. Thank you.
Okay. I know that's a lot. I talk really fast. All right. Well, if you guys have any questions, I hope it's helpful. Carts are an amazing, amazing feature and really do add a lot of efficiency to your business. So thanks for joining me.
Cheers.